How healthy is your chicken? Well, the answer, it's right here in plain sight. Packaged parts can hide a lot. Whole chickens, there's no secrets. If you give me the next few minutes, I'm going to prove to you 5 ways that a single bird beats cut parts every time. When I was in the clinic, I used to watch patients struggle with food quality confusion. So as an answer to that, I started raising my own pasture-raised birds that individuals could inspect with their own eyes, which got me to thinking, that's not the only reason that someone might want to see a whole bird. And what's the difference really at the end of the day between the whole bird and buying cut pieces? Well, today I'm going to give you those 5 reasons. So let's jump in. And reason number 1 is going to be that you can see the whole animal, the whole bird. You're not looking at individual pieces, or you're not even getting pieces from random birds. You're getting pieces from the single bird itself. You've got the 2 breasts, the 2 thighs, the 2 drumsticks, the 2 tenders in there, and you're not buying a package that could be a culmination of multiple birds. But what's more important about that is that when you buy a frozen bird like this, say from a ranch like ours, and you thaw this out and you look at it, you can inspect this bird. You can see every part of this bird. Now, why is that important? Well, if you contrast that to a typical production system where maybe as that bird is going through the processing facility, if something is wrong with that bird, that part gets cut off and it's separated out. It doesn't allow you to see the end product being, for example, a damaged thigh, or maybe the meat is bruised for some reason, or more importantly, if that tissue is damaged in some way, you're not going to see that. Or if it's not a healthy tissue, you're not going to see that because that was just cut off, discarded, and it didn't give you an opportunity to view the full health of the bird. And also, for example, if you're buying, say, like skinless pieces, you're not going to see the fat quality for that animal either. When you cook a whole bird, especially, and the skin is maintained on there, that gives you perspective into the quality of the collagen, because collagen is going to be a component to the skin, how robust that is. It's going to give you insight into how the animal was raised. Even just the size of the carcass can make a difference, although you do have to be careful with that one, because in a conventional production system, there's different time frames as to when those animals are harvested. But when you buy a whole chicken from a local ranch, you can ask the rancher or the farmer, how long was this bird raised? So it gives you an idea overall of what the health of the animal is, which is bar none an important reason here. Now, reason number 2 that whole birds are going to provide a great value and are going to have advantages over cut birds is because it's also going to give you perspective on nutrient density. I mentioned the collagen component there for a moment, but there's many other facets beyond just, for example, the precursors to collagen that you might find in the skin. When you look at the nutrient density in these whole birds, eating a whole bird is going to have the intention of forcing you to eat, and I say that in a positive way. It's forcing you to think outside of what is your normal box. You're going to be eating not just white meat, but you're going to be eating dark meat. So for example, if you're a person who reaches for chicken breast all the time, when you buy a whole bird, now you're going to start to learn how to use those other cuts. You're going to learn to use the thighs, you're going to learn to use the drumsticks. And I'll give you an example with me personally. I thought I really liked chicken breast. Like, I thought that was the cut that I preferred. And as I've raised my own birds, I find that the thighs are by far my favorite cut off of these birds. But the point here is that the thighs, the drumsticks, that's going to get you into some of the darker meat, especially around the thighs, the bone in the thighs, and that's going to have some different nutrient density associated with it. So now, as opposed to just sticking to the same cut all the time, you're expanding out what your culinary tastes are, what your taste preferences are, and you're going to start increasing your nutrient density just because you're beginning to eat eat cuts that you may not have otherwise considered eating prior. In addition to that, you're also going to find that when you're using an entire bird, you're going to have the opportunity to make things like collagen and a lot of those nutrients that you may not have been getting access to before. Now you're going to pull in that extra nutrient density. And I'm saying all this with the assumption that when you go out and you buy these whole birds, that you're actually seeking out a high quality pasture raised bird. Now you've got to do, as the consumer, your own homework and find out, is the person that's producing your bird producing that bird at the standards that you expect? So those are questions you have to ask. But if they are, then there's going to be advantages with that animal being raised on pasture, because now they're going to have availability to all the different forbs, all the different things that are unique to their environment, the bugs, the insects, the other little critters that they'll peck around and eat, that when they're in a conventional production model, they're not going to have access to those things. So the nutrient density just isn't going to be the same in comparison to when that animal is raised on pasture. We've seen that actually play out in the literature when it comes to ruminant animals. And granted, chickens aren't ruminant animals, but the important point here is that when that animal is raised in a very diverse environment, there's going to be an opportunity for all of those nutrients that are unique to that environment to get incorporated into the meat and into the fat of that animal. And who benefits from that? Well, you do. Reason number 3 that whole chickens are an advantage over cut chickens is that you're going to be able to meal stretch with a whole chicken that you're not going to be able to do when you're buying individual cuts. And there's a couple of ways you can come to that conclusion. One is that there is meat on a whole chicken when you've prepared it, that let's say you roast a whole chicken in the oven, or you bake the whole chicken, or maybe you grill a whole chicken. When you do that, you're going to find that there's meat on the around the chest of the bird, on the underside of the bird, that is going to be there, that you'll be able to pick through, you'll be able to eat. Maybe you can use that for leftovers, or you can mix that in another dish. And when you're buying individual cuts, you're just not getting that. The other advantage here is going back to looking at using the carcass to be able to make broth with. And in fact, I was looking at these chickens when I pulled them out. I don't know that you'll be able to see this here, but this is the neck of the chicken. And so there's going to be meat around that neck of that chicken too. So you'd be able to pull that off and utilize that in another dish. But when you have the neck, the carcass there, and if you save the other bones as you're using those individual cuts, then you're going to be able to use those again and make a broth with those. And that broth, well, that can be an added protein source. Granted, it's not going to be the same as eating the meat, but collagen has its own benefits that you're going to be able to tap into. But you can add that to, say, your next side dish, and now you've flavored your next side dish you flavored your side dish for your next meal, that you wouldn't have had the advantage to be able to do that before. And that's the way to pull those little added extra bit of nutrients out of the total carcass of the bird that you weren't doing when you were individually cutting the bird up. Reason number 4 to choose a whole chicken, and look at this guy. This guy produced an over 7-pound carcass. These birds were thriving, no doubt. And this one's 5.5. So these are really nice carcasses, a lot of value for the cost on these. But my point here is that when you look at these, the next reason here is that you're going to have what I typically will call culinary diversity. And what that simply means is that you're going to step outside of your box when you start buying whole chickens. Because now, if you've been a person, and I'll just use this example of going back to chicken breast because that's what so many people reach for. When you go to chicken breast, or if that's been your norm, now you're thinking, well, how do I use the drumsticks? And how do I use the thighs? And I have the wings in here. How am I going to use those wings? So these are all different options of dishes that can start to mix up your diet a bit, increase your palate, but get you out of that mundane routine pattern that you're probably stuck in if you're buying cuts all the time, because cuts are going to allow you to probably sit there and make the same recipes over and over and over and over again. And while those may be your favorites, most of us like a little diversity in our diet as well. We don't want to get too bogged down with eating the same foods all the time. I certainly know that that's my preference. My family likes that. I can even watch my young son. He takes a drumstick and he'll eat on that drumstick, and at other times, he'd rather have the chicken breast. And so it's just even at the level of kids, they want something different from time to time. And even when you look at things like the drumsticks and the thighs, I was just thinking about this, and the wings hold true to this too. Typically the way that we eat those is with our hands. We hold those cuts up and we eat those cuts. And there's just something unique and a bit more primal, if you will, about that, and how that allows us to relate to food as compared to when we just take a chicken breast and we're just using our knife and our fork to cut that up and eat it, or add it to a salad, or say some other example. The point is that you're making a greater connection to your food when you're putting your hands on it. And if you're buying parts all the time, well, you're not putting your hands on the bird as much. You're not making as much of a connection to your food. And if you really want to be successful with food and allow food to create the most value in healing and supporting your overall health, there's no greater way to start that process than to put your hands on that bird and connect to that bird and to your food source and where that food is coming from. Now, reason number 5 that whole birds are going to trump cut pieces, this hands down is my top tier reason, and it comes down to ethical and environmental considerations. And let's talk with the ethical component for a moment, because this in some way is related to your ethics as well. And so here's what I mean by that. When I look at a bird like I've got in front of me right here, and I know that I raised this bird came from one ranch. This bird was handled mostly by myself and my father in the production process. So predominantly by me moving the chicken tractors every day, but he was right there helping me with all of this. So we've got one farm that this came from. You've got one processor, one small farm USDA inspected processor that we use. There's one person predominantly handling these birds as they're going through the processor. And then you've got one set of hands on it, right? You've got one package and one label. As compared to when you have cut pieces, you're going to, especially if you're looking at comparing this to a conventional model, which you're just running out and grabbing from the grocery store, you're going to have multiple birds that are going through that system. And so there's multiple processors or multiple people in the processor that are being used. And if you've never seen a conventional system, one of the things to note on that is that you've got trucks coming in from multiple farms into that one processing point. So you could be getting parts from any number of different farms that are coming into that processing location. Plus, when you're cutting the birds up, you've got more labels, you've got more packaging. These are all environmental considerations. We don't want more plastic out there in the environment. There's already a problem with that. So we want to make sure that we're being conscientious about those things. And when you've just got one plastic vacuum sealed bird that is in a single package, single label, you know everything about that. And there is more transparency in that process than when you're dealing with cuts and everything that has to happen when you're dealing with a cut bird. So by far, to me, the most important reason when it comes to dealing with whole birds versus cut birds or cut parts is that there's transparency there. You as the consumer get to fully put your eyes on that whole bird and have a better understanding of what the health of that bird is. And you can also appreciate that you are now taking part in a system that is thinking forward. It's looking at how that whole bird is supporting the land and all the other things that we talk about from regenerative concepts in agriculture. So next time when you go to look at how am I going to buy birds, think about buying a whole bird as opposed to buying cut pieces. You'll know much more about the food product that you're consuming. Now, some of you may look at this and say, well, how do I know where I'm getting this? Well, let me just give you, how do I know where I'm getting it from? Is it a quality bird? Well, go to Harvest Hills Ranch. take a look at what we offer. There's other farms out there that do a great job, but at least get the conversation going within your home and try to find sources that are local to you. Mine may not be in your general area. The other thing I would say that I've seen to be a sticking point for a lot of individuals when it comes to a whole bird is that you look at this and you think, how am I going to take this whole bird and break it down into individual parts? Well, glad you asked, because I've got a video right here on the screen where I'm going to show you the quick and easy way to take this bird and break it down into parts that you're more accustomed to.